Chapter 6 Of the White Bull and the Karinsky Peasant. Before I have the honour of presenting the reader with Foma Fomich in person, I think it is absolutely essential to say a few words about Falay, and to explain what there was terrible in the fact of his dancing the Karinsky, and Foma Fomich's finding him engaged in that light-hearted diversion. Falay was a house serf boy, an orphan from the cradle, and a godson of my uncle's late wife. My uncle was very fond of him. That fact alone was quite sufficient to make Foma Fomich, after he had settled at Stepanchikovo and gained complete domination over my uncle, take a dislike to the latter's favourite Falay. But Madame la Générale took a particular fancy to the boy, who, in spite of Foma Fomich's wrath, remained upstairs in attendance on the family. Madame la Générale herself insisted upon it, and Foma gave way, storing up the injury — he looked on everything as an injury — in his heart, and revenging it on every favourable occasion on my uncle, who was in no way responsible. Falay was wonderfully good-looking. He had a girlish face, the face of a beautiful peasant girl. Madame la Générale petted and spoiled him, prized him as though he were a rare and pretty toy, and there was no saying which she loved best, a little curly black dog Ami or Falay. We have already referred to his costume, which was her idea. The young ladies gave him pomatum, and it was the duty of the barber Kuzma to curl his hair on holidays. This boy was a strange creature. He could not be called a perfect idiot or imbecile, but he was so naive, so truthful and simple-hearted, that he might sometimes be certainly taken for a fool. If he had a dream, he would go at once to tell it to his master or mistress. He joined in the conversation of the gentlefolk without caring whether he was interrupting them. He would tell them things quite impossible to tell gentlefolks. He would dissolve into the most genuine tears when his mistress fell into a swoon, or when his master was too severely scolded. He sympathized with every sort of distress. He would sometimes go up to Madame la Générale, kiss her hands, and beg her not to be cross, and the old lady would magnanimously forgive him these audacities. He was sensitive in the extreme, kind-hearted, as free from malice as a lamb, and as gay as a happy child. They gave him dainties from the dinner-table. He always stood behind Madame la Générale's chair, and was awfully fond of sugar. When he was given a lump of sugar, he would nibble at it with his strong, milk-white teeth, and a gleam of indescribable pleasure shone in his merry blue eyes and all over his pretty little face. For a long time Foma Fomich raged, but, reflecting at last that he would get nothing by anger, he suddenly made up his mind to be Falay's benefactor. After first pitching into my uncle for doing nothing for the education of the house serfs, he determined at once to set about training the poor boy in morals, good manners, and French. "What?" he would say in defence of his absurd idea, an idea not confined to Foma Fomich, as the writer of these lines can testify.
"What? He's always upstairs, waiting on his mistress. One day, forgetting that he does not know French, she will say to him, for instance, 'Donnez-moi mon mouchard.' He ought to be equal to the occasion, and able to do his duty even then."
But it appeared not only that it was impossible to teach Falay French, but that the cook Andron, the boy's uncle, who had disinterestedly tried to teach him to read Russian, had long ago given it up in despair and put the alphabet away on the shelf. Falay was so dull at book-learning that he could understand absolutely nothing. Moreover, this led to further trouble. The house serfs began calling Falay in derision a Frenchman, and old Gavrila, my uncle's valet, openly ventured to deny the usefulness of learning French. This reached Foma Fomich's ears, and bursting with wrath, he made his opponent, Gavrila, himself learn French as a punishment. This was the origin of the whole business of teaching the servants French, which so exasperated Mr. Batcheyev. It was still worse in regard to manners. Foma was absolutely unable to train Falay to suit his ideas, and, in spite of his prohibition, the boy would go in to tell him his dreams in the morning, which Foma Fomich considered extremely ill-mannered and familiar. But Falay obstinately remained Falay. My uncle was, of course, the first to suffer for all this.
Do you know what he has done today?"
Foma would exclaim, selecting a moment when all were gathered together in order to produce a greater sensation.
"Do you know what your systematic spoiling is coming to? Today he gobbled up a piece of pie given him at the table, and do you know what he said of it? Come here, silly fool, come here, idiot, come here, red face."
Falay would come up, weeping and rubbing his eyes with both hands.
"What did you say when you greedily ate up your pie? Repeat it, before everyone."
Falay would dissolve in bitter tears and make no answer.
"Then I'll speak for you, if that's how it is. You said, slapping yourself on your stuffed and vulgar stomach, 'I've gobbled up the pie as Martin did the soap.' Oh, upon my word, Colonel, can expressions like that be used in educated society, still more in aristocratic society? Did you say it or not? Speak!"
I did," Falay would assent, sobbing.
"Well, then tell me now, does Martin eat soap? Where have you seen a Martin who eats soap? Tell me, give me an idea of this phenomenal Martin."
Silence.
"I am asking you," Foma would persist, "who is this Martin? I want to see him. I want to make his acquaintance. Well, what is he? A registry clerk? An astronomer? A provincial? A poet? An army captain? A serving man? He must have been something. Answer!"
Serving man," Falay would answer at last, still weeping.
Who is his master?"
But Falay was utterly unable to say who was his master. It would end, of course, in Foma Fomich's rushing out of the room in a passion, crying out that he had been insulted. Madame la Générale would show symptoms of an attack, while my uncle would curse the hour of his birth, beg everybody's pardon, and for the rest of the day walk about on tiptoe in his own rooms. As ill luck would have it, on the day after the trouble over Martin and the soap, Falay, who had succeeded in completely forgetting about Martin and all his woes of the previous day, informed Foma Fomich as he took in his tea in the morning that he had had a dream about a white bull. This was the last straw. Foma Fomich was moved to indescribable indignation. He promptly summoned my uncle and began upbraiding him for the vulgarity of the dream dreamed by his Falay. This time severe steps were taken. Falay was punished. He had to kneel down in the corner. He was sternly forbidden to dream of such coarse, rustic subjects.
"What I am angry at," said Foma, "apart from the fact that he really ought not to dare to think of blurting out his dreams to me, especially a dream of a white bull, apart from that, you must agree, Colonel, what is the white bull but a proof of coarseness, ignorance, and loutishness in your unkempt Falay? As the thoughts are, so will the dreams be. Did I not tell you before that you would never make anything of him, and that he ought not to remain upstairs waiting upon the family? You will never develop that senseless peasant soul into anything lofty or poetical. Can't you manage?
he went on, addressing Falay.
"Can't you manage to dream of something elegant, refined, genteel, some scene from good society, such as gentlemen playing cards, or ladies walking in a lovely garden?"
Falay promised he would be sure to dream next night of gentlemen or ladies walking in a lovely garden. As he went to bed, Falay prayed tearfully on the subject, and wondered for a long time what he could do so as not to dream of the accursed white bull. But deceitful are the hopes of man. On waking up next morning, he remembered with horror that he had again been dreaming all night of the hateful white bull, and had not dreamed of even one lady walking in a lovely garden. This time the consequences were singular. Foma Fomich positively declared that he did not believe in the possibility of such a coincidence, the possibility of such a repetition of a dream, and that Falay was prompted to say this by someone of the household, perhaps even by the colonel himself, on purpose to annoy Foma Fomich. There was no end of an uproar, tears, and reproaches. Madame la Générale was taken ill towards the evening. The whole household wore a dejected air. There was still a faint hope that the following, that is, the third night, Falay would be sure to have some dream of refined society. What was the universal indignation when, for a whole week, every blessed night, Falay went on dreaming of the white bull, and nothing but the white bull. It was no use even to think of refined society. But the most interesting point was that Falay was utterly incapable of thinking of lying, of simply saying that he had dreamed not of the white bull, but of a carriage, for instance, full of ladies and Foma Fomich. This was all the more strange, since lying indeed would not have been so very sinful in so extreme a case. But Falay was so truthful that he positively could not tell a lie even if he wanted to. It was indeed not even suggested to him by anyone. They all knew that he would betray himself at the first moment, and Foma Fomich would immediately detect him in lying. What was to be done? My uncle's position was becoming intolerable. Falay was absolutely incorrigible. The poor boy was positively growing thinner from worry. The housekeeper Malanya declared that he was bewitched, and sprinkled him with magic water. She was assisted in this compassionate and salutary operation by the tender-hearted Praskovya Ilyinichna, but even that was no use. Nothing was of use. "The deuce take the damn thing!" Falay said. "The same dream every night. Every evening I pray, 'Don't let me dream of the white bull, don't let me dream of the white bull,' and there it is! There it is, the damned beast facing me, huge with horns and such thick lips. Oh!" My uncle was in despair, but luckily Foma Fomich seemed all at once to have forgotten about the white bull. Of course, no one believed that Foma Fomich could forget a circumstance so important. Everyone assumed with terror that he was keeping the white bull in reserve, and would bring it out on the first suitable occasion. It appeared later on that Foma Fomich had no thoughts to spare for the white bull at that moment. He had other business in hand, other cares. Other plans were maturing in his beneficent and fertile brain. That is why he let Falay breathe in peace, and everyone else, too, had a respite. The boy grew gay again, and even began to forget what had happened. Even the white bull began to visit him less and less frequently, though it still at times reminded him of its fantastic existence. In fact, everything would have gone well if there had been no such thing as the Karinsky. It must be noted that Falay was an excellent dancer. Dancing was his chief accomplishment, even something like his vocation. He danced with vigour, with inexhaustible gaiety, and he was particularly fond of dancing the Karinsky peasant. Not that he was so much attracted by the frivolous and in any case inexplicable steps of that volatile peasant. No, he liked dancing the Karinsky solely because to hear the Karinsky and not dance to the tune was utterly beyond him. Sometimes in the evenings, 2 or 3 of the footmen, the coachmen, the gardener who played the fiddle, and even some of the ladies of the servants' hall, would gather together in a circle in some backyard as far away as possible from Foma Fomitch. Music and dances would begin, and finally the Karinsky would triumphantly come into its own. The orchestra consisted of 2 balalaikas, a guitar, a fiddle, and a tambourine, with which the postilion Mityushka was a capital hand. Falay's condition was worth watching at such times. He would dance to complete oblivion of himself, to utter exhaustion, encouraged by the shouts and laughter of his audience. He would squeal, shout, laugh, clap his hands. He danced as though carried away by some intangible outside force with which he could not cope, and he struggled persistently to keep up with the continually increasing pace of the reckless tune as he tapped on the ground with his heels. These were minutes of real delight to him, and everything would have gone happily and merrily if rumours of the Karinsky had not at last reached Foma Fomitch. Foma Fomitch was petrified and sent at once for the colonel.
"There is only one thing I wish to learn from you," Foma began. "Have you positively sworn to be the ruin of that luckless idiot or not? In the first case I will stand aside at once. If not, then I—"
"But what is the matter? What has happened?" cried my uncle, alarmed.
"You ask what has happened? Do you know that he is dancing the Karinsky?"
Well, what of it?"
"Well, what of it?" shrieked Foma. "And you say that you, their master, standing in a sense in the place of their father, but have you then a true idea of what the Karinsky is? Do you know that that song describes a debauched peasant attempting in a state of drunkenness the most immoral action? Do you know what sacrilege it is that vicious little Russian is committing? He is trampling upon the most precious bonds, and so to say, stamping them under his big loutish boots, accustomed to tread only the floor of the village inn. And do you realize that you have wounded my moral feelings by your answer? Do you realize that you have insulted me personally by your answer? Do you understand that or not?"
"But, Foma, why, it's only a song, Foma."
"You say only a song, and you are not ashamed that you own to me that you know that song? You, a member of honourable society, the father of honourable innocent children, and a colonel into the bargain. Only a song? But I am certain that the song is drawn from real life. Only a song? But what decent man can without a blush of shame admit that he knows that song, that he has ever heard that song? What man could?"
"Well, but you see, you know it yourself, Foma, since you ask about it," my disconcerted uncle answered, in the simplicity of his heart.
"What? I know it. You have insulted me!"
Foma Fomitch cried at once, leaping up from his chair and spluttering with fury. He had never expected such a crushing answer. I will not undertake to describe the wrath of Foma Fomitch. The colonel was ignominiously driven from the presence of the guardian of morality for the ill manners and tactlessness of his reply. But from that hour Foma Fomitch vowed to catch Falay in the act of dancing the Karinsky. In the evening, when everyone supposed he was busy at work, he stole out into the garden, went the round of the kitchen garden, and threaded his way into the hemp patch, from which there was a view in the distance of the backyard in which the dances took place. He stalked poor Falay as a sportsman stalks a bird, picturing with relish the wigging he would, if he succeeded, give the whole household, and the colonel in particular. His unwearying efforts were at last crowned with success. He had come upon the Karinsky. It will be understood now why my uncle tore his hair when he saw Falay weeping and heard Vidopliasov announce Foma Fomitch, who so unexpectedly and at such a moment of perturbation was standing before us in person. Chapter 7. Foma Fomitch. I scrutinized this gentleman with intense curiosity. Gavrila had been right in saying that he was an ugly little man. Foma was short, with light eyebrows and eyelashes and grizzled hair, with a hooked nose and with little wrinkles all over his face. On his chin there was a big wart. He was about 50. He came in softly with measured steps, with his eyes cast down, but yet the most insolent self-confidence was expressed in his face, and in the whole of his pedantic figure. To my astonishment, he made his appearance in a dressing-gown, of a foreign cut, it is true, but still a dressing-gown, and he wore slippers, too. The collar of his shirt, unadorned by any cravat, was a lay-down one, of Valfin. This gave Foma Fomitch an extremely foolish look. He went up to an empty armchair, moved it to the table, and sat down in it, without saying a word to anyone. All the hubbub, all the excitement that had been raging a minute before, vanished instantaneously. There was such a hush that one could have heard a pin drop. Madame la Générale became as meek as a lamb. The cringing infatuation of this poor imbecile for Foma Fomitch was apparent now. She fixed her eyes upon her idol, as though gloating over the sight of him. Miss Peripolitzin rubbed her hands with a simper, and poor Praskovya Ilyinichna was visibly trembling with alarm. My uncle began bustling about at once. "Tea, sister, only plenty of sugar in it, sister. Foma Fomitch likes plenty of sugar in his tea after his nap. You do like plenty of sugar, don't you, Foma?"
"I don't care for any tea just now," Foma pronounced deliberately and with dignity, waving him off with a careworn air. "You always keep on about plenty of sugar." These words, and Foma's entrance, so incredibly ludicrous in its pedantic dignity, interested me extremely. I was curious to find out to what point, to what disregard of decency, the insolence of this upstart little gentleman would go. "Foma," cried my uncle, "let me introduce my nephew, Sergei Alexandrovitch. He has just arrived." Foma Fomitch looked him up and down. "I am surprised that you always seem to take pleasure in systematically interrupting me, Colonel," he said, after a significant silence, taking absolutely no notice of me. "One talks to you of something serious, and you discourse of goodness knows what. Have you seen Falay?"
"I have, Foma."
"Ah, you have seen him. Well, I will show you him again, though you have seen him. You can admire your handiwork and moral sense. Come here, you idiot. Come here, you Dutch-faced fool. Come along, don't be afraid."
Falay went up to him with his mouth open, sobbing and gulping back his tears. Foma Fomitch looked at him with relish.
"I called him a Dutch-faced fool with intention, Pavel Semyonitch," he observed, lolling at his ease in his low chair and turning slightly towards Obnoskin, who was sitting next him. And speaking generally, you know, I see no necessity for softening my expressions in any case. The truth should be the truth, and however you cover up filth, it will still remain filth. Why trouble to soften it? It's deceiving oneself and others. Only a silly, worldly numbskull can feel the need of such senseless conventions. Tell me, I submitted to your judgment. Do you find anything lovely in that face? I mean, of course, anything noble, lovely, exalted, not just vulgar red cheeks.
Foma Fomitch spoke quietly, evenly, and with a kind of majestic nonchalance. "Anything lovely in him?" answered Obnoskin with insolent carelessness. "I think that he is simply a good piece of roast beef, nothing else."
"Went up to the looking-glass and looked into it today,"
Foma continued, pompously omitting the pronoun.
"I am far from considering myself a beauty, but I could not help coming to the conclusion that there is something in these grey eyes which distinguished me from any Falay. There is thought, there is life, there is intelligence in these eyes. It is not myself I am praising. I am speaking generally of our class. Now, what do you think? Can there be a scrap, a grain of soul in that living beefsteak? Yes, indeed, take note, Pavel Semyonich, how these people utterly devoid of thought and ideal, and living by meat alone, always have revoltingly fresh complexions, coarsely and stupidly fresh. Would you like to know the level of his intellectual faculties? Hey, you image, come nearer, let us admire you. Why are you gaping? Do you want to swallow a whale? Are you handsome? Answer, are you handsome?
"I am," answered Falay with smothered sobs. Obnoskin roared with laughter. I felt that I was beginning to tremble with anger.
"Do you hear?"
Foma went on, turning to Obnoskin in triumph.
"Would you like to hear something more? I have come to put him through an examination. You see, Pavel Semyonich, there are people who are desirous of corrupting and ruining this poor idiot. Perhaps I am too severe in my judgment, perhaps I am mistaken, but I speak from love of humanity. He was just now dancing the most improper of dances. That is of no concern to anyone here, but now hear for yourself. Answer, what were you doing just now? Answer. Answer immediately, do you hear?"
"I was dancing," said Falay, mastering his sobs.
"What were you dancing? What dance? Speak."
"The Karinsky."
"The Karinsky? And who was that Karinsky? Do you suppose I can understand anything from that answer? Come, give us an idea. Who was your Karinsky?"
"A peasant."
"A peasant? Only a peasant? I'm surprised. A remarkable peasant, then. Then was it some celebrated peasant? If poems and dances are made about him, come, answer."
Foma could not exist without tormenting people. He played with his victim like a cat with a mouse. But Falay remained mute, whimpering and unable to understand the question.
"Answer,"
Foma persisted.
"You are asked what sort of peasant was it. Speak. Was he a seigneurial peasant, a crown peasant, free, bond, industrial? There are ever so many sorts of peasants."
"Industrial."
"Ah, industrial. Do you hear, Pavel Semyonich? A new historical fact. The Karinsky peasant was industrial. Well, what did that industrial peasant do? For what exploits is he celebrated in song and dance?"
The question was a delicate one, and since it was put to Falay, a risky one too. "Come, Though—" Obnoskin began, glancing towards his mamma, who was beginning to wriggle on the sofa in a peculiar way. But what was to be done? Foma Fomich's whims were respected as law. "Upon my word, uncle, if you don't suppress that fool, you'll see what he's working up to. Falay will blurt out some nonsense, I assure you," I whispered to my uncle, who was utterly distracted and did not know what line to take. "You had really better, Foma," he began. "Here, I want to introduce to you, Foma, my nephew, a young man who is studying mineralogy."
"I beg you, Colonel, not to interrupt me with your mineralogy, a subject of which, as far as I am aware, you know nothing, and others, perhaps, little more. I am not a baby. He will answer me that this peasant, instead of working for the welfare of his family, has been drinking till he is tipsy, has sold his coat for drink, and is running about the street in an inebriated condition. That is, as is well known, the subject of the poem that sings the praises of drink. Don't be uneasy. He knows now what he has to answer. Come, answer. What did that peasant do? Come, I have prompted you. I have put the words into your mouth. What I want is to hear it from you yourself, what he did, for what he was famous, how he gained the immortal glory of being sung by the troubadours. Well?" The luckless Falay looked round him in misery, and, not knowing what to say, opened and shut his mouth like a carp hauled out of the water onto the sand. "I am ashamed to say," he bellowed at last in utter despair. "Ah, ashamed to say," bellowed Foma in triumph. "See, that's the answer I have wrung out of him, Colonel. Ashamed to say, but not ashamed to do. That's the morality which you have sown, which has sprung up, and which you are now watering. Oh, but it is useless to waste words. Go to the kitchen now, Falay. I'll say nothing to you now out of regard for my audience, but today, you'll be severely and rigorously punished. If not, if this time they put you before me, you may stay here and entertain your betters with the Karinsky, while I will leave this house today. That's enough, I have spoken. You can go."
"Come, I think you really are severe," mumbled Obnoskin. Just so, just so," my uncle began crying out, but he broke off and subsided. Foma looked gloomily askance at him.
"I wonder, Pavel Semyonich," he went on, "what all our contemporary writers, poets, learned men and thinkers are about. How is it they pay no attention to what songs are being sung by the Russian people, and to what songs they are dancing? What have the Pushkins, the Lermontovs, the Borozdins been about all this time? I wonder at them. The people dance the Karinsky, the apotheosis of drunkenness, while they sing of forget-me-nots. Why don't they write poems of a more moral tone for popular use? Why don't they fling aside their forget-me-nots? It's a social question. Let them depict a peasant, but a peasant made genteel, so to say, a villager and not a peasant. Let them paint me the village sage in his simplicity, maybe even in his bark shoes. I don't object even to that, but brimming over with the virtues which, I make bold to say, some overlorded Alexander of Macedon may envy. I know Russia, and Russia knows me. That is why I say this. Let them portray that peasant, way down maybe with a family and grey hair, in a stuffy hut, hungry too, maybe, but contented, not repining, but blessing his poverty, and indifferent to the rich man's gold. Let the rich man at last with softened heart bring him his gold. Let indeed in this the virtues of the peasant be united with the virtues of his master, perhaps a grand gentleman. The villager and the grand gentleman, so widely separated in social grade, are made one at last in virtue. Ah, that is an exalted thought. But what do we see? On one side, forget-me-nots, and on the other, the peasant dashing out of the pothouse and running about the street in a dishevelled condition. What is there poetic in that? Tell me, pray, what is there to admire in that? Where is the wit? Where is the grace? Where is the morality? I am amazed at it.
I am ready to pay you 100 roubles for such words, said Yezhevikin with an enthusiastic air. And you know the bald devil will try and get it out of me, he whispered on the sly. Flatter away, flatter away. Yes, you put that very well, Obnoskin pronounced. Exactly so, cried my uncle, who had been listening with the deepest attention and looking at me with triumph. What a subject has come up, he whispered, rubbing his hands. A topic of many aspects, dash it all. Foma Fomich, here is my nephew, he added in the overflow of his feelings. He is engaged in literary pursuits too. Let me introduce him. As before, Foma Fomich paid not the slightest attention to my uncle's introduction. For God's sake, don't introduce me any more. I entreat you in earnest, I whispered to my uncle with a resolute air.
Ivan Ivanitch, Foma began, suddenly addressing Mizintchikov and looking intently at him, we have just been talking. What is your opinion? Mine? You're asking me? Mizintchikov responded in surprise, looking as though he had only just woken up. Yes, you. I'm asking you because I value the opinion of really clever people, and not the problematic wiseacres who are only clever because they are being continually introduced as clever people, as learned people, and are sometimes sent for expressly to be made a show of, or something of the sort. This thrust was aimed directly at me, and yet there was no doubt that, though Foma Fomich took no notice whatever of me, he had begun this whole conversation concerning literature entirely for my benefit, to dazzle, to annihilate, to crush at the first step the clever and learned young man from Petersburg. I, at any rate, had no doubt of it. If you want to know my opinion, I agree with your opinion, answered Mizintchikov listlessly and reluctantly. You always agree with me. It's positively wearisome, replied Foma. I tell you frankly, Pavel Semyonich, he went on, after a brief silence again addressing Obnoskin, if I respect the immortal Karamzin, it is not for his history, not for Marfa Pozadnitsa, not for old and new Russia, but just for having written Frol Silin. It is a noble epic. It is a purely national product, and will live for ages and ages, a most lofty epic. Just so, a lofty epic. Frol Silin, a benevolent man. I remember, I have read it. He bought the freedom of 2 girls, too, and then looked towards heaven and wept. A very lofty trait, my uncle chimed in, beaming with satisfaction. My poor uncle. He never could resist taking part in an intellectual conversation. Foma gave a malicious smile, but he remained silent. They write very interestingly, though, even now, Anfisa Petrovna intervened discreetly. The Mysteries of Brussels, for instance. I should not say so, observed Foma, as it were regretfully. I was lately reading one of the poems, not up to much. Forget-me-nots. Of contemporary writers, if you will, the one I like best of all is Scribbler, a light pen. Scribbler, cried Anfisa Petrovna.
Is that the man who writes letters in the magazines? Oh, how enchanting it is! What playing with words!"
"Precisely. Playing with words. He, so to speak, plays with his pen. An extraordinary lightness of style."
"Yes, but he is a pedant," Obnoskin observed carelessly.
"Yes, a pedant he is, I don't dispute it. But a charming pedant, a graceful pedant. Of course, not one of his ideas would stand serious criticism, but one is carried away by his lightness. A babbler, I agree, but a charming babbler, a graceful babbler. Do you remember, for instance, in one of his articles he mentions that he has his own estates?"
"Estates?" my uncle caught up. "That's good. In what province?" Foma stopped, looking fixedly at my uncle, and went on in the same tone.
"Tell me, in the name of common sense, of what interest is it to me, the reader, to know that he has his own estates? If he has, I congratulate him on it. But how charmingly, how jestingly it is described! He sparkles with wit. He splashes with wit. He boils over. He is a Narzan of wit. Yes, that is the way to write. I fancy I should write just like that, if I were to consent to write for magazines."
"Perhaps you would do even better," Yezhevikin observed respectfully. "There is positively something musical in the language," my uncle put in. Foma Fomitch lost patience at last.
"Colonel," he said, "is it not possible to ask you, with all conceivable delicacy, of course, not to interfere with us, but to allow us to finish our conversation in peace? You cannot offer an opinion in our conversation. You cannot. Don't disturb our agreeable literary chat. Look after your land, drink your tea, but leave literature alone. It will lose nothing by it, I assure you. I assure you." This was surpassing the utmost limit of impudence. I did not know what to think. "Why, you yourself, Foma, said it was musical?" my uncle brought out in confusion and distress. "Quite so. But I spoke with a knowledge of the subject. I spoke appropriately, while you—"
"To be sure, but we spoke with intellect," put in Yezhevikin, wriggling round Foma Fomitch. "We have just a little intelligence, though we may have to borrow some. Just enough to run a couple of government departments, and we might manage a third if need be. That's all we can boast of." "So it seems I have been talking nonsense again," said my uncle in conclusion, and he smiled his good-natured smile.
"You admit it, anyway," observed Foma.
It's all right, Foma. I am not angry. I know that you pull me up like a friend, like a relation, like a brother. I have myself allowed you to do it, begged you to, indeed. It's a good thing. It's for my benefit. I thank you for it, and will profit by it." My patience was exhausted. All that I had hitherto heard about Foma Fomitch had seemed to me somewhat exaggerated. Now, when I saw it all for myself, my astonishment was beyond all bounds. I could not believe my senses. I could not understand such impudence, such insolent domineering on one side, and such voluntary slavery, such credulous good-nature on the other. Though, indeed, my uncle himself was confused by such impudence, that was evident. I was burning with desire to come to grips with Foma, to do battle with him, to be rude to him in some way, in as startling a fashion as possible, and then let come what may. This idea excited me. I looked for an opportunity, and completely ruined the brim of my hat while I waited for it. But the opportunity did not present itself. Foma absolutely refused to notice me. "You are right, perfectly right, Foma," my uncle went on, doing his utmost to recover himself, and to smooth over the unpleasantness of what had been said before. "What you say is true, Foma. I thank you for it. One must know the subject before one discusses it. I am sorry. It is not the first time I have been in the same predicament. Only fancy, Sergei, on one occasion I was an examiner. You laugh, but there it is. I really was an examiner, and that was all about it. I was invited to an institution to be present at an examination, and they set me down together with the examiners as a sign of respect. There was an empty seat. So I will own to you I was frightened. I was positively alarmed. I do not know a single science. What was I to do? I thought that in another minute they would drag me myself back to the blackboard. Well, what then? Nothing happened. It went off all right. I even asked questions myself. Who was Noah? On the whole, they answered splendidly. Then we had lunch and toasted enlightenment in champagne. Oh, it was a fine school."
Foma Fomitch and Obnoskin burst into roars of laughter.
"Indeed, I laughed myself afterwards," cried my uncle, laughing in a most good-natured way, and delighted that general cheerfulness was restored. "Yes, Foma, here goes. I will amuse you all by telling you how I put my foot in it once. Only fancy, Sergei, we were staying at Krasnogorsk."
"Allow me to inquire, Colonel, will you be long in telling your story?"
Foma interposed. "Oh, Foma, why, it is the most delightful story, enough to make one split with laughter. You only listen. It is good. It really is good. I'll tell you how I put my foot in it." "I always listen with pleasure to your stories when they are of that sort," Obnoskin pronounced, yawning.
"There is no help for it. We must listen," Foma decided.
"But upon my word, it is good, Foma, it really is. I want to tell you how I put my foot into it on one occasion, Amphissa Petrovna. You listen too, Sergei. It is an edifying story indeed. We were staying at Krasnogorsk," my uncle began, beaming with pleasure, talking with nervous haste, and falling into innumerable parentheses, as he always did when he was beginning to tell some story for the pleasure of his audience. "As soon as we arrived, the same evening we went to the theatre. There was a first-rate actress, Kuropatkina. She afterwards ran away with a cavalry captain, Zviakov, and did not finish the play she was acting, so they let down the curtain. This Zviakov was a beast, both for drinking and playing cards, and not that he was a drunkard, but simply ready to join his comrades at festive moments. But when he did get really drunk, then he forgot everything. Where he lived, in what country, and what his name was. Absolutely everything, in fact. But he was a very fine fellow, really. Well, I was sitting in the theatre. In the interval I got up, and I ran across a comrade called Kornuhov. A unique fellow, I assure you. We had not seen each other for 6 years, it is true. Well, he had stayed in the company, and was covered with crosses. I have heard lately he's an actual civil councillor. He transferred to the civil service and worked his way up to a high grade. Well, of course, we were delighted. One thing and another. In the box next to us were 3 ladies. The one on the left was the ugliest woman in the world. Afterwards I found out that she was a splendid woman, the mother of a family, and the happiness of her husband. Well, so I, like a fool, blurt out to Komuhov, "I say, old man, can you tell me who that scarecrow is?"
"Who do you mean?"
"Why, that one."
"That's my cousin."
"Oh, the devil! Judge of my position. To put myself right. No, not that one," I said. "What eyes you've got! I mean the one who is sitting there. Who is that?"
"That's my sister."
Oh, plague it all! And his sister, as luck would have it, was a regular rosebud, a sweet little thing, dressed up like anything. Brooches, gloves, bracelets, in fact, a perfect cherub. Afterwards she married a very fine fellow called Pitin. She eloped with him. It was a runaway match. But now it is all right, and they are very well off. Their parents are only too delighted. Well, so I cried out, 'Oh, no,' not knowing how to get out of it. 'Not that one, the one in the middle. Who is she?'
'In the middle? Well, my boy, that's my wife.'
And she, between ourselves, was a perfect sugar-plum. I felt that I could have eaten her up at one mouthful. I was so delighted with her. 'Well,' I said, 'have you ever seen a fool? Here is one facing you, and here's his head. Cut it off. Don't spare it.' He laughed. Afterwards he introduced them to me, and must have told them, the rascal. They were in fits of laughter over something. And I must say I never spent an evening more merrily. So you see, Foma, old man, how one can put one's foot in it. But it was no use my poor uncle laughing. In vain he looked round the company with his kind and good-humoured eyes. A dead silence was the response that greeted his light-hearted story. Foma Fomitch sat in gloomy dumbness, and all the others followed his example. Only Obnoskin gave a faint smile, foreseeing the baiting my uncle would get. My uncle was embarrassed and flushed crimson. This was what Foma desired.
"Have you finished?"
he asked at last, turning with dignity to the embarrassed storyteller. "Yes, Foma."
"And are you satisfied?"
"How do you mean, satisfied?" asked my poor uncle miserably.
"Are you happier now? Are you pleased at having broken up the pleasant literary conversation of your friends by interrupting them and so satisfying your petty vanity?"
"Oh, come, Foma, I wanted to amuse you all, and you—"
"Amuse?"
cried Foma, suddenly becoming extraordinarily heated.
"But you are only able to depress us, not amuse us. Amuse? But do you know that your story was almost immoral? I say nothing of its impropriety, that is self-evident. You informed us just now with rare coarseness of feeling that you laughed at innocence, at an honourable lady, simply because she had not the honour to please you. And you wanted to make us laugh, that is, applaud you, that is, applaud a coarse and improper action, and all because you are the master of this house. You can do as you like, Colonel. You can seek out toadies, flatterers, sycophants. You can even send for them from distant parts, and so increase your retinue to the detriment of straightforwardness and frank nobility of soul. But never will Foma Opiskin be your toady, your flatterer, your sycophant. I can assure you of that, if of anything."
"Oh, Foma, you misunderstand me, Foma."
"No, Colonel, I have seen through you for a long time. I know you through and through. You are devoured by boundless vanity. You have pretensions to an incomparable keenness of wit, and forget that wit is blunted by pretension. You—"
"Oh, stop, Foma, for God's sake. Have some shame, if only before people."
"It's sad, you know, to see all this, Colonel, and it's impossible to be silent when one sees it. I am poor. I am living at the expense of your mother. It may be expected, perhaps, that I should flatter you with my silence, and I don't care for any milksop to take me for your toady. Possibly, when I came into this room just now, I intentionally accentuated my truthful candour, was forced to be intentionally rude, just because you yourself put me into such a position. You are too haughty with me, Colonel. I may be taken for your slave, your toady. Your pleasure is to humiliate me before strangers, while I am really your equal in every respect. Perhaps I am doing you a favour in living with you, and not you doing me one. I am insulted, so I am forced to sing my own praises. That's natural. I cannot help speaking. I must speak. I'm bound at once to protest, and that is why I tell you straight out that you are phenomenally envious. You see, for instance, someone in a simple, friendly conversation unconsciously reveals his knowledge, his reading, his taste, and so you are annoyed. You can't sit still. Let me display my knowledge and my taste, you think. And what taste have you, if you will allow me to ask? You know as much about art, if you would excuse my saying so, Colonel, as a bull about beef. That's harsh and rude, I admit. Anyway, it is straightforward and just. You won't hear that from your flatterers, Colonel.
Oh, Foma!
It is, oh, Foma, to be sure. The truth is not a feather-bed, it seems. Very well, then, we will speak later about this. But now let me entertain the company a little. You can't be the only one to distinguish yourself all the time. Pavel Semyonich, have you seen this sea monster in human form? I have been observing him for a long time. Look well at him. Why, he would like to devour me whole at one gulp.
He was speaking of Gavrila. The old servant was standing at the door, and certainly was looking on with distress at the scolding of his master.
I want to entertain you, too, with a performance, Pavel Semyonich. Come here, you scarecrow. Come here. Condescend to approach us a little nearer, Gavrila Ignatitch. Here, you see, Pavel Semyonich, is Gavrila. As a punishment for rudeness, he is studying the French dialect. Like Orpheus, I soften the manners of these parts not only with songs, but with the French dialect. Come, Mossou Frenchy. He can't bear to be called Mossou. Do you know your lesson?
I have learnt it, said Gavrila, hanging his head.
Well, parlez-vous français?
Oui, monsieur, je le parle un peu. I don't know whether it was Gavrila's mournful face as he uttered the French phrase, or whether they were all aware of Foma's desire that they should laugh, but anyway, they all burst into a roar of laughter as soon as Gavrila opened his lips. Even Madame la Générale deigned to be amused. Anfisa Petrovna, sinking back on the sofa, shrieked, hiding her face behind her fan. What seemed most ludicrous was that Gavrila, seeing what his examination was being turned into, could not restrain himself from spitting and commenting reproachfully, "To think of having lived to such disgrace in my old age." Foma Fomitch was startled.
What? What did you say? So you think fit to be rude?
No, Foma Fomitch, Gavrila replied with dignity. My words were no rudeness, and it's not for me, a serf, to be rude to you, a gentleman born. But every man bears the image of God upon him, his image and semblance. I am 63 years old. My father remembers Pugachev, the monster, and my grandfather helped his master, Matvey Nikitich, God grant him the kingdom of heaven, to hang Pugachev on an aspen tree, for which my father was honoured beyond all others by our late master, Afanasy Matveyich. He was his valet, and ended his life as butler. As for me, Foma Fomitch, sir, though I am my master's bondman, I have never known such a shame done me from my birth upward till now." And at the last word, Gavrila spread out his hands and hung his head. My uncle was watching him uneasily. "Oh, come, that's enough, Gavrila," he cried. "No need to say more, that's enough."
Never mind, "Never mind," said Foma, turning a little pale and giving him a forced smile. "Let him speak. These are the fruits of your—"
"I will tell you everything," said Gavrila with extraordinary fervour. "I will conceal nothing. You may bind the hands, but there is no binding the tongue. Though I may seem beside you, Foma Fomitch, a low man, in fact a slave, yet I can feel insulted. Service and obedience I am always bound to give you, because I am born a slave, and must do my duty in fear and trembling. You sit writing a book. It's my duty not to let you be interrupted. That is my real duty. Any service that is needed I am pleased to do. But in my old age, to bleat in some outlandish way and be put to shame before folk— why, I can't go into the servants' room now. You are a Frenchie, they say, a Frenchie. No, Foma Fomitch, sir. It's not only a fool like me, but all good folks have begun to say the same, that you have become now a wicked man, and that our master is nothing but a little child before you, that though you are a gentleman by birth and a general's son, you yourself may be near being a general too, yet you are as wicked as a real fury must be."
Gavrila had finished. I was beside myself with delight. Foma Fomitch sat pale with rage in the midst of the general discomfiture, and seemed unable to recover from Gavrila's sudden attack upon him. He seemed at that moment to be deliberating how far his wrath should carry him. At last the outburst followed.
"What? He dares to be rude to me? But this is mutiny!"
shrieked Foma, and he leapt up from his chair. Madame la Générale followed his example, clasping her hands. There was a general commotion. My uncle rushed to turn the culprit out.
"Put him in fetters! Oh, put him in fetters!" cried Madame la Générale. "Take him to the town at once and send him for a soldier, Yegorushka, or you shall not have my blessing. Fix the fetters on him at once and send him for a soldier."
"What?" cried Foma. "Slave, lout, Hamlet! He dares to be rude to me! Ha, ha! A rag to wipe my boots! He dares to call me a fury!"
I slipped forward with unusual determination. "I must confess that in this affair I am completely of Gavrila's opinion," I said, looking Foma Fomitch straight in the face and trembling with excitement. He was so taken aback by this onslaught that for the first minute he seemed unable to believe his ears.
"What's this now?"
he cried out at last, pouncing upon me in a frenzy and fixing his little bloodshot eyes upon me.
"Why, who are you?"
"Foma Fomitch," my uncle, utterly distracted, began. "This is Seryozha, my nephew."
"The learned gentleman!"
yelled Foma.
"So he's the learned gentleman. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, journal des débuts. No, my friend, you won't take me in. I am not such a fool. This isn't Petersburg. You won't impose upon us, and I spit on your des débats. You have your des débats, but to us that's all fiddlesticks, young man. Learned. You know as much as I have forgotten 7 times over. So much for your learning."
If they had not held him back, I believe he would have fallen upon me with his fists. "Why, he is drunk," I said, looking about me in bewilderment.
"Who? I?"
cried Foma, in a voice unlike his own. "Yes, you."
"Drunk?"
"Yes, drunk." This was more than Foma could endure. He uttered a screech as though he were being murdered, and rushed out of the room. Madame la Générale seemed desirous of falling into a swoon, but reflected that it would be better to run after Foma Fomitch. She was followed by all the others, and last of all by my uncle. When I recovered myself and looked round, I saw in the room no one but Yezhevikin. He was smiling and rubbing his hands. "You promised just now to tell me about the Jesuits," he said in an insinuating voice. "What?" I asked, not understanding what he was talking about. "About the Jesuits. You promised just now to tell me some little anecdote." I ran out into the veranda, and from there into the garden. My head was going round. Chapter 8. A Declaration of Love. I wandered about the garden for about a quarter of an hour, feeling irritated and extremely dissatisfied with myself, and deliberating what I should do now. The sun was setting. Suddenly, at a turning into a dark avenue, I met Nastenka face to face. She had tears in her eyes, in her hand a handkerchief with which she was wiping them. "I was looking for you," she said. "And I for you," I answered. "Tell me, am I in a madhouse?" "Certainly not in a madhouse," she answered resentfully, with an intent glance at me. "Well, if that's so, what's the meaning of it all? For Christ's sake, give me some advice. Where's my uncle gone now? Can I go to him? I am very glad that I have met you. Perhaps you will be able to suggest what I ought to do." "No, better not go to him. I have just come away from them." "Why? Where are they?" "Who knows? Perhaps by now they have run into the kitchen garden again," she said irritably. "Into the kitchen garden?" "Why, last week Foma Fomitch began shouting that he wouldn't stay in the house, and all at once he ran into the kitchen garden, found a spade in the shed, and began digging the beds. We were all amazed, and wondered whether he hadn't gone out of his mind. 'That I may not be reproached for doing nothing for my keep,' said he, 'here I will dig and pay for the bread I have eaten, and then I will go away. That's what you have driven me to.' And then they all began crying and almost falling on their knees before him. They took the spade away from him, but he would go on digging. He dug up all the turnips. That was all he did. They humoured him once. He may do it again. That would be just like him." "And you tell that with such coolness," I cried out with intense indignation. She looked at me with flashing eyes. "Forgive me, I really don't know what I am saying. Listen, do you know what I've come here for?" No," she answered, flushing crimson, and some painful feeling was reflected in her charming face. "You must excuse me," I went on. "I am upset. I feel that this is not how I ought to have begun speaking of this, especially with you, but never mind. To my thinking, openness in such matters is best. I confess, that is, I meant to say, you know my uncle's design? He has told me to ask for your hand." "Oh, what nonsense! Don't speak of it, please," she said, hurriedly interrupting me and flushing crimson. I was disconcerted. "How nonsense? But he wrote to me, you see." "So he wrote to you?" she asked eagerly. "Oh, what a man! How he promised that he would not write! What nonsense! Good heavens, what nonsense!" Forgive me," I muttered, not knowing what to say. "Perhaps I have acted incautiously, crudely, but you see, it's such a moment. Only think, goodness knows what's going on around us. Oh, for God's sake, don't apologize. Believe me that it is painful for me to hear this apart from that, and yet, do you know, I wanted to speak to you myself, to find out something. Oh, how vexatious! So he really wrote to you? That's what I was most afraid of. My God, what a man he is! And you believed him and galloped here full speed? Oh, well, that's the last straw." She did not conceal her annoyance. My position was not an attractive one. "I must confess, I did not expect," I blurted out in the utmost confusion, "such a turn. I expected, on the contrary—" "Ah, so that's what you expected?" she brought out with light irony, biting her lip. "And you must show me the letter he wrote." "Very good. And please don't be angry with me, don't be offended. I have trouble enough without that," she said in an imploring voice, though a mocking smile faintly gleamed on her pretty lips. "Oh, please, don't take me for a fool," I cried hotly. "But perhaps you are prejudiced against me. Perhaps someone has spoken against me. Perhaps you say this because I put my foot in it just now, but that is nothing, I assure you. I know what a fool I must look to you now. Don't laugh at me, please. I don't know what I'm saying, and it is all because I'm 22, damn it." "Oh, mercy on us, why?" "You ask why? Anyone who is 22, has it written in his face. As I had, for instance, when I bounced out just now in the middle of the room, or as when I stand before you now. Oh, it's a damnable age." "Oh, no, no," answered Nastenka, hardly able to restrain her laughter. "I am sure that you are kind and nice and clever, and I say that sincerely, I do, really. But you are only very vain. You may get over that in time." "I fancy I'm only as vain as I ought to be." "Oh, no. Think how embarrassed you were just now, and what for? Because you stumbled as you came in? What right had you to turn into ridicule your good, generous uncle who has done you so much kindness? Why did you try to turn the laugh against him when you were laughable yourself? That was horrid, shameful. It does not do you credit, and I must own I disliked you very much at that minute, so there." "That's true, I was a blockhead. More than that, I did a mean thing. You noticed it, and that is my punishment. Abuse me, laugh at me, but listen, perhaps you will change your opinion of me in the end," I added, carried away by a strange feeling. "You know so little of me as yet. Afterwards, when you know more of me, then, perhaps—" "Oh, for God's sake, let us stop this conversation!" cried Nastenka, with visible impatience. Very well, let us stop. But where can I see you?" "Where can you see me?" "Why, this cannot be the last word we have to say to each other, Anastasia Yevgrafovna. For God's sake, let me meet you again. Today, for instance. But it's already getting dark, so if it is anyhow possible, let it be tomorrow early. I will ask to be called earlier on purpose. There's an arbour over there by the pond. You see, I remember it, I know the way. I used to stay here when I was little." "Meet you? What for? Why, we are talking now." "But I know nothing yet, Nastasia Yevgrafovna. I will first find out everything from my uncle. Why, he is bound to tell me everything now, and then perhaps I shall have something very important to tell you." No, you mustn't," cried Nastenka. "Let us end it all at once now, so that we may never think of it again. And don't go to that arbour for nothing. I assure you I shall not go. And please put all this nonsense out of your head, I beg you, in earnest." "So then uncle has behaved like a madman to me," I cried in an excess of insufferable vexation. "Why did he send for me? But listen, what is that noise?" We were close to the house. From the open windows came the sounds of shrieking and extraordinary outcries. "My God!" she said, turning pale. "Again! I foresaw it would be so." "You foresaw it? Nastasia Yevgrafovna, one more question. Of course, I have not the least right to do so, but I venture to put this last question to you for the good of us all. Tell me, and I will keep it secret to the grave, tell me, frankly, is my uncle in love with you or not?" "Oh, please put that nonsense out of your head once and for all," she cried, flushing crimson with anger. "And you, too. If he were in love with me, he wouldn't have wanted to have married me to you," she added with a bitter smile. "And what put that idea into your head? Don't you know what the trouble's about? Do you hear those shouts?"
"But it's Foma Fomitch."
"Yes, of course it is Foma Fomitch. But now the trouble is over me, because they are saying the same thing as you, the same senseless thing. They, too, suspect that he is in love with me. And as I am poor and of no consequence, and as it costs nothing to throw dirt on me, and they want to marry him to someone else, they are insisting that he should send me home to my father to make things sure. And when they talk to him of that, he flies into a rage at once. He's ready to tear Foma Fomitch to pieces even. They are quarrelling about that now. I feel that it is about that."
"So that's the truth. So he really is going to marry that Tatiana, then?"
"That Tatiana?"
"Yes, that silly fool."
"Not a silly fool at all. She is good. You have no right to talk like that. She has a noble heart, nobler than many other people. It's not her fault that she is unfortunate."
"Forgive me. Supposing you are quite right about that, yet aren't you mistaken about the chief point? Tell me, how is it, then, that they make your father welcome, as I noticed? Why, if they were so set against you, as you say, and were turning you out, they would be angry with him, too, and would give him a cold welcome."
"Why, don't you see what my father is doing for my sake? He is playing the fool before them. He is received just because he has succeeded in ingratiating himself with Foma Fomitch. And, as Foma Fomitch was a buffoon himself, you see, it flatters him to have buffoons about him now. For whose sake do you suppose my father does it? He does it for me, only for me. He wants nothing. He wouldn't bow down to anyone for himself. He may be very absurd in some people's eyes, but he is a noble man, the noblest of men. He thinks, goodness knows why, and certainly not because I get a good salary here, I assure you, he thinks that it is best for me to stay here in this house. But now I have quite brought him round. I wrote to him firmly. He has come on purpose to take me, and, if it comes to extremes, tomorrow. For things have got beyond everything. They are ready to tear me to pieces, and I am certain that they are quarrelling about me now. They are at him on my account. They will be the death of him. And he is like a father to me, do you hear? More even than my own father. I won't stay to see it. I know more than other people. Tomorrow I am going. Who knows? Perhaps that will make them put off, if only for a time, his marriage to Tatiana Ivanovna. Here I have told you all about it now. Tell him this, because I can't speak to him now. We are watched, especially by that Perepelitsyn woman. Tell him not to worry about me. Tell him I would rather eat black bread and live in my father's hut than be the cause of his sufferings here. I'm a poor girl, and I ought to live like a poor girl. But my God, what an uproar, what shouting, what is happening? Yes, come what may, I shall go in. I will tell them all this straight to their faces myself, whatever happens. I ought to do it. Goodbye."
She ran away. I remained standing on the same spot, fully conscious of the absurdity of the part it had just been my lot to play, and completely puzzled to think how it would all be settled. I was sorry for the poor girl, and I was afraid for my uncle. All at once I found Gavrila at my side.
He was still holding the exercise book in his hand.
"Please come to your uncle,"
he said in a dejected voice. I pulled myself together. To my uncle? Where is he? What's happening to him now?"
"In the tea-room, where your honour had tea this afternoon."
"Who was with him?"
"His honour's alone. He is waiting."
"For whom? For me?"
"He has sent for Foma Fomitch. Happy days have come for us," he added with a deep sigh.
"Foma Fomitch? Where are the others? Where's your mistress?"
"In her own apartments. Her honour's fallen into a swoon, and now she is lying unconscious and crying."
Conversing in this way, we reached the veranda. It was completely dark outside. My uncle really was alone, in the very room in which my encounter with Foma Fomitch had taken place, and he was striding up and down it. There were lighted candles on the tables. He was pale and breathing hard. His hands were trembling, and from time to time a nervous shudder ran over his whole frame. Chapter 9. Your Excellency.
"Ah, my dear boy, it's all over. It's all settled,"
he pronounced in a tragic half-whisper. "Uncle," I said, "I heard shouts and uproar."
"Yes, my boy, shouts there were, shouts of all sorts. Mamma is in a swoon, and everything is upside down now. But I have made up my mind, and shall insist on my own way. I am afraid of no one now, Seryozha. I want to show them that I, too, have a will of my own, and I will show them. And so I have sent for you on purpose that you may help me show them. My heart is broken, Seryozha, but I am bound to act with severity. Justice is inexorable."
"But whatever has happened, uncle?"
"I am parting with Foma,"
my uncle pronounced in a resolute voice. "Uncle," I cried, delighted, "you could have thought of nothing better, and if I can assist in any way to carry out your decision, make use of me, now and always."
"Thank you, my boy, thank you. But now it is all settled. I am waiting for Foma. I have already sent for him. Either he or I. We must part. Either Foma leaves this house tomorrow, or I swear I'll throw up everything and go into the Hussars again. They will take me and give me a division, away with all this bobbery. A fresh start in every way now. What have you got that French exercise book for?" he cried furiously, addressing Gavrila. "Away with it! Burn it, stamp on it, tear it to pieces. I am your master, and I order you not to learn French. You can't disobey me, you dare not, for I am your master, and not Foma Fomitch." "I thank thee, O Lord," Gavrila muttered to himself. Evidently things had got beyond a joke. "My dear," my uncle went on, with deep feeling, "they are asking me the impossible. You shall decide. You stand between me and them now as an impartial judge. You don't know what they have insisted on my doing. You don't know, and at last they have formally demanded it. They have spoken out. But it's repugnant to humanity, to decent feeling, to honour. I will tell you all about it, but first—" "I know about it already, uncle," I cried, interrupting him. "I can guess. I have just been talking to Nastasia Yevgrafovna." "My dear, not a word of that now," he interrupted me hurriedly, as though he were frightened. "I will explain about it later on, but meanwhile— well," he cried to Fyodor Dostoyevsky, who walked in, "where is Foma Fomitch?" Fyodor Dostoyevsky entered with the information that Foma Fomitch did not wish to come.
and considered that the insistence on his doing so was rude to the point of impertinence, so that his honour, Foma Fomitch, was greatly offended by it. "Bring him! Drag him! Fetch him here! Drag him here by force!" cried my uncle, stamping. Vido Pliasov, who had never seen his master in such a rage, retreated in alarm. I was surprised. Something very important must have happened, I thought, if a man of his character is capable of being moved to such wrath and such determination. For some moments my uncle walked up and down the room, as though struggling with himself. "Don't tear up your exercise book, though," he said to Gavrila at last. "Wait a little and stay here. You may perhaps be wanted. My dear," he went on, turning to me, "I think I was too noisy just now. Everything must be done with dignity and manliness, but without shouting and insulting people. Do you know what, Seryozha? Wouldn't it be better if you were to go out? It will be just the same to you. I will tell you all about it later on, eh? What do you think? Do that for my sake, please."
"Are you frightened, uncle? Are you repenting?" I said, looking at him intently.
"No, no, my dear boy, I am not repenting," cried my uncle with redoubled earnestness. "I am afraid of nothing now. I have taken decisive steps, the most decisive. You don't know, you can't imagine what they have demanded of me. Ought I to consent? No, I will show them. I have made a stand against them, and I will show them. I was bound to show them sooner or later. But you know, my dear boy, I am sorry I sent for you. It will be very hard, perhaps, for Foma if you are here, so to say, the witness of his humiliation. You see, I want to turn him out of the house in a gentlemanly way, without humiliating him at all, though, indeed, it is only a form of words to say, without humiliation. Oh, the position is such, my boy, that however honeyed one's speech is, it will still be insulting. I am coarse, uneducated, perhaps. I may do something in my foolishness that I may regret later. Anyway, he has done a great deal for me. Oh, go away, my dear. Here, they are bringing him. Seryozha, I entreat you, go away. I will tell you all about it afterwards. For Christ's sake, go away." And uncle led me out onto the veranda at the very moment when Foma walked into the room. But I must confess I did not go away. I made up my mind to stay on the veranda, where it was very dark, and so it was difficult to see me from within. I made up my mind to play the eavesdropper. I do not justify my action, but I can boldly say that I consider I performed an heroic feat in standing that whole half-hour on the veranda without losing patience. From my position I could not only hear well, but could even see well. The doors were of glass. I now beg the reader to imagine Foma Fomitch after he had been commanded to come, and threatened with force if he refused.
"Can my ears have heard that aright, Colonel?" cried Foma, entering the room. "Was that your message?"
"Yes, Foma, yes. Calm yourself," my uncle answered valiantly. "Sit down. We must have a little serious, friendly talk, like brothers. Sit down, Foma."
Foma Fomitch majestically sat down on a low chair. My uncle walked about the room with rapid and uneven steps, evidently puzzled how to begin.
"Like brothers, precisely," he repeated. "You understand me, Foma. You are not a boy. I am not a boy either. In fact, we are both getting on. You see, Foma, we don't get on together on certain points. Yes, on certain points, precisely. And so, Foma, would it not be better to part? I am convinced that you are a generous man, that you wish me well, and so... but why prolong the discussion? Foma, I am your friend, now and always, and I swear that by all the saints. Here are 15,000 roubles in silver. It's all I have to bless myself with. I have scraped together every farthing. I have robbed my own children. Take it boldly. I ought, it is my duty, to secure your future. It's almost all in banknotes and very little in cash. Take it boldly. You owe me nothing, for I shall never be able to repay you for all you have done for me. Yes, precisely. I feel that, though now we are in disagreement over the most important point, tomorrow or the day after, or when you like, let us part. Drive to our little town, Foma. It is not 8 miles away. There, behind the church, in the first side street, there is a little house with green shutters, a charming little house belonging to the widow of a priest that looks as though it had been built for you. She is selling it, and I will buy it for you in addition to this money. Settle there near us. Work at literature. Study science. You will win fame. The officials there are gentlemanly, agreeable, disinterested men. The head priest is learned. You shall come and stay with us for the holidays, and we shall all live as in paradise. Will you? So these are the terms on which Foma is to be kicked out, I thought. Uncle did not say a word to me about money. For a long time, a profound silence reigned. Foma sat in his easy-chair as though struck dumb, gazing fixedly at my uncle, who was evidently becoming uncomfortable from that silence and that stare.
"The money,"
Foma articulated at last, in an affectedly faint voice.
"Where is it? Where is that money? Give it me. Give it here at once."
"Here it is, Foma. Everything I have to the last farthing, just 15,000. Here are notes and securities you can see for yourself. Here."
"Gavrila, take that money," Foma said mildly. "It may be of use to you, old man." "But no!"
he cried all at once, raising his voice to an extraordinary squeal and leaping up from his chair.
"No, give me that money first, Gavrila. Give it to me! Give it me! Give me those millions, that I may trample them underfoot! Give them to me, that I may tear them to pieces, spit on them, fling them away, spurn them, scorn them! They offer money to me! To me! They try to buy me to leave this house. Have I heard that? Have I lived to see this last ignominy? Here they are! Here are your millions! Look! There! 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 That is how Foma Erpiskin behaves, if you did not know it before, Colonel."
And Foma threw the whole roll of notes about the room. It was noticeable that he did not tear or spit on one of the notes, as he had boasted of doing. He only crumpled them a little, and even that rather carefully. Gavrila flew to pick up the notes from the floor, and later on, after Foma's departure, he carefully restored them to his master. Foma's action produced an overwhelming impression upon my uncle. In his turn, he now stood facing him, immovably, senselessly, open-mouthed. Foma, meanwhile, had replaced himself in his armchair, and was panting as though from unutterable agitation. "You are a man of lofty feelings, Foma," my uncle cried out at last, recovering himself. "You are the noblest of men."
"I know it,"
Foma answered in a faint voice, but with ineffable dignity. "Foma, forgive me. I have been a mean wretch to you, Foma."
"Yes, to me,"
Foma assented. "Foma, it is not your disinterestedness that I marvel at," my uncle went on enthusiastically.
but that I could have been so coarse, blind, and mean as to offer you money in such circumstances. But, Foma, you are mistaken about one thing. I was not bribing you, I was not paying you for leaving this house, but just simply I wanted you to have money that you might not be in straits when you leave me. I swear that. On my knees, I'm ready to beg your forgiveness, Foma, and if you like, I'm ready to go down on my knees before you this moment, if you wish me to."
"I don't want your kneeling, Colonel."
"But my God, Foma, consider. You know I was carried away, overwhelmed. I was not myself. But do tell me, do say in what way I may be able to efface this insult. Instruct me, admonish me."
In no way, Colonel. And rest assured that tomorrow morning I shall shake the dust from off my boots on the threshold of this house."
And Foma began to get up from his chair. My uncle rushed in horror to make him sit down again.
"No, Foma, you will not go away, I assure you," cried my uncle. "It is no use talking about dust and boots, Foma. You are not going away, or I will follow you to the utmost ends of the earth, and I will follow you till such time as you forgive me. I swear it, Foma, and I will do it."
"Forgive you? You are to blame," said Foma. "But do you yet understand the wrong you have done me? Do you understand that even the fact that you have given me a piece of bread here has become a wrong to me now? Do you understand that now, in 1 minute, you have poisoned every morsel I have tasted in your house? You reproached me just now with those morsels, with every mouthful of the bread I have eaten. You have shown me now that I have been living like a slave in your house, like a flunkey, like a rag to wipe your polished boots. And yet I, in the purity of my heart, imagined up to now that I was residing in your house as a friend and a brother. Did you not yourself in your snake-like speeches assure me 1,000 times of that brotherly relation? Why did you mysteriously weave for me the snare in which I have been caught like a fool? Why have you dug in the darkness this wolf-pit into which you have yourself thrust me now? Why did you not strike me down with one blow before? Why did you not wring my neck at the very beginning like a cock because for instance, simply because he doesn't lay eggs? Yes, that's just it. I stick to that comparison, Colonel, though it is taken from rustic life and recalls the trivial tone of modern literature. I stick to it because one sees in it all the senselessness of your accusation. For I am as much in fault as this supposititious cock who displeases his frivolous owner by not laying eggs. Upon my word, Colonel, does one pay a friend, a brother, with money? And what for? That's the point. What for? Here, my beloved brother, I am indebted to you. You have even saved my life. Here are a few of Judas's silver pieces for you. Only get away out of my sight. Ugh, how naive, how crudely you have behaved to me. You thought that I was thirsting for your gold, while I was cherishing only the heavenly feeling of securing your welfare. Oh, how you have broken my heart! You have played with my finest feelings like some wretched boy with a 9-pin. Oh, long ago, Colonel, I foresaw all this. That is why I have long choked over your bread. I have been suffocated by your bread. That is why your feather beds have stifled me. They have stifled me instead of lulling me to slumber. That is why your sugar, your sweetmeats have been cayenne pepper to me and not sweetmeats. No, Colonel, live alone. prosper alone, and let Foma go his sorrowful way with a wallet on his back. So it shall be, Colonel."
"No, Foma, no, it shall not be so, it cannot be so," moaned my uncle, utterly crushed.
"Yes, Colonel, yes. So it shall be, for so it must be. Tomorrow I shall depart from you. Scatter your millions, strew all my way, all the high road to Moscow with your banknotes, and I will walk proudly and scornfully over your notes. This very foot, Colonel, will trample your notes into the mud and crush them. For Foma Opiskin, the nobility of his own soul will be enough. I have said it, and I have shown it. Farewell, Colonel, farewell."
And Foma began getting up from his chair. Forgive me, Foma, forget it," repeated my uncle in an imploring voice.
"Forgive you? Why, what use will my forgiveness be to you? Why, supposing I do forgive you, I am a Christian. I cannot refuse to forgive. I have almost forgiven you already. But consider yourself. Is it in the least consistent with common sense and gentlemanly feeling for me to stay 1 minute longer in your house? Why, you have turned me out of it."
It is consistent, Foma. I assure you that it is consistent."
"It is? But are we equals now? Don't you understand that I have, so to speak, crushed you by my generosity, and you have crushed yourself by your degrading action? You are crushed, and I am uplifted. Where is the equality? Is friendship possible without equality? I say this uttering a cry of lamentation from my heart, and not triumphing, not exalting myself over you, as you perhaps imagine."
"But I am uttering a cry of lamentation from my heart too, Foma, I assure you."
"And this is the man,"
Foma went on, changing his severe tone for a sanctimonious one,
"this is the man for whom I so often kept vigil at night. How many times on my sleepless nights have I arisen from my bed, have lighted a candle and said to myself, 'Ah, now he is sleeping peacefully, trusting in you. Do not you, Foma, sleep. Be valiant for him. Maybe you will think of something more for the welfare of that man.' That is what Foma thought on his sleepless nights, Colonel, and this is how that Colonel has repaid him. Oh, but enough, enough!"
"But I will deserve your friendship again, Foma. I will deserve it, I swear to you."
"You will deserve it? Where is the guarantee? As a Christian, I will forgive you and even love you, but as a man and a gentleman, I shall not be able to help despising you. I must. I am bound to in the name of morality, because, I repeat it, you have disgraced yourself, while my action has been most high-minded. Why, who out of your set would perform such an action? Would any one of them refuse an immense sum of money which poor, destitute Foma, despised by all, has refused from devotion to true greatness? No, Colonel. To be on a level with me, you must perform now a regular series of heroic deeds. And what are you capable of when you cannot even address me as your equal, but call me Foma like a servant?"
"Foma? But I call you so from affection," wailed my uncle. "I did not know you disliked it. Oh, my God, if I had only known—"
"You," Foma pursued, "you who could not, or rather would not grant the most insignificant, the most trivial request when I asked you to address me like a general as Your Excellency.
But, Foma, you know that is really, so to say, high treason, Foma.
High treason? You have learned some phrase out of a book and repeat it like a parrot. But do you know, you put me to shame, covered me with ignominy by your refusal to call me Your Excellency. You covered me with ignominy because, without understanding my reasons, you made me look a capricious fool worthy of a madhouse. Why do you suppose I don't understand that I should have been ridiculous if I had wanted to be styled Excellency? I who despise all these ranks and earthly grandeurs, insignificant in themselves if they are not lighted up by virtue. For 1,000,000, I would not accept the rank of general without virtue. And meanwhile, you looked upon me as a madman. It was for your benefit I sacrificed my pride and allowed you to be able to look upon me as a madman, you and your learned gentlemen. It was solely in order to enlighten your mind, to develop your morals, and to shed upon you the light of new ideas that I made up my mind to demand from you a general's title. I wanted you, for the future, not to regard generals as the highest luminaries on this earthly sphere. I wanted to show you that rank is nothing without greatness of soul, and that there is no need to rejoice at the arrival of your general, when there are, perhaps, standing at your side, people made illustrious by virtue. But you have so constantly prided yourself before me on your rank of colonel that it was hard for you to say to me, Your Excellency. That was the root of it. That was where one must look for the reason, and not in any breach of the decrees of Providence. The whole reason is that you are a colonel, and I am simply Foma.
No, Foma, no, I assure you that it is not so. You are a learned man, you are not simply Foma. I respect you.
You respect me? Good. Then tell me, since you respect me, what is your opinion? Am I worthy of the rank of a general, or am I not? Answer at once and straightforwardly. Am I or not? I want to see your intelligence, your development.
For honesty, for disinterestedness, for intelligence, for lofty nobility of soul, you are worthy of it, my uncle brought out with pride.
Well, if I am worthy of it, why will you not say Your Excellency to me?
Foma, I will, perhaps.
But I insist. And I insist now, Colonel. I require it and insist. I see how hard it is for you. That is why I insist. That sacrifice on your side will be the first step in your moral victory, for, don't forget it, you will have to gain a series of moral victories to be on a level with me. You must conquer yourself, and only then I shall feel certain of your sincerity.
Tomorrow, then, I will call you Your Excellency, Foma.
No, not tomorrow, Colonel. Tomorrow can take care of itself. I insist that you, now, at once, address me as Your Excellency.
Certainly, Foma. I am ready. Only, what do you mean by at once, Foma?
Why not at once? Or are you ashamed? That's an insult to me, if you are ashamed.
Oh, well, if you like, Foma, I am ready. I am proud to do so, indeed. Only it's queer, Foma, apropos of nothing. Good day, Your Excellency. You see, one can't.
No, not good day, Your Excellency, that's an offensive tone. It is like a joke, a farce. I do not permit such jokes with me. You forget yourself, Colonel. You forget yourself. Change your tone.
And you are not joking, Foma?
In the first place, I am not Foma, Yegor Ilyich, and don't you forget it. I am Foma Fomich.
Oh, Foma Fomich, I am delighted, really. I am altogether delighted, only what am I to say?
You are puzzled what to add to the phrase, Your Excellency. That I understand. You should have explained yourself long ago. It is excusable indeed, especially if a man is not a literary character, to put it politely. Well, I will help you, since you are not a literary character. Repeat after me, Your Excellency.
Well, Your Excellency.
No, not well, Your Excellency, but simply Your Excellency. I tell you, Colonel, you must change your tone. I hope, too, that you will not be offended if I suggest that you should make a slight bow, and at the same time bend forward, expressing in that way respectfulness and readiness, so to say, to fly on his errands. I have been in the Society of Generals myself, and I know all that, so then, Your Excellency?
Your Excellency.
How inexpressibly delighted I am that I have at last an opportunity of asking your forgiveness for not having recognized from the first moment Your Excellency's soul. I make bold to assure you that I will not, for the future, spare my poor efforts for the public welfare. Well, that's enough.
Poor uncle. He had to repeat all this rigmarole, phrase by phrase, word by word. I stood and blushed as though I were guilty. I was choking with rage.
Well, don't you feel now, the torturer went on, that your heart is suddenly lighter, as though an angel had flown into your soul? Do you feel the presence of that angel? Answer.
Yes, Foma, I certainly feel more at ease, answered my uncle.
As though, after you have conquered yourself, your heart were, so to say, steeped in holy oil?
Yes, Foma, certainly it all seems, as it were, in butter.
As it were in butter? I wasn't talking of butter, though. Well, never mind. You see, Colonel, the value of a duty performed. Conquer yourself. You are vain, immensely vain.
I see I am, Foma, my uncle answered with a sigh.
You are an egoist, and indeed a gloomy egoist.
An egoist I am, it is true, Foma, and I see it. Ever since I have come to know you, I have learned to know that, too.
I am speaking to you now like a father, like a tender mother. You repel people, and forget that a friendly calf sucks two mothers.
That is true, too, Foma.
You are coarse. You jar so coarsely upon the human heart, you so egoistically insist upon attention, that a decent man is ready to run from you to the utmost ends of the earth.
My uncle heaved another deep sigh.
Be softer, more attentive, more loving to others. Forget yourself for the sake of others, then they will think of you. Live, and let others live. That is my rule. Suffer, labour, pray, and hope. Those are the truths which I would like to instill into all mankind at once. Model yourself on them, and then I shall be the first to open my heart to you. I shall weep on your bosom, if need be. As it is, It is always I, and my gracious self with you. But you know, one may get sick at last of your gracious self, if you will allow me to say so."
"A sweet-tongued gentleman," Gavrila brought out, awestruck. "That's true, Foma. I feel all that," my uncle assented, deeply touched. "But I am not altogether to blame, Foma. I've been brought up like this. I have lived with soldiers, but I swear, Foma, I have not been without feeling. When I said good-bye to the regiment, all the hussars, all my division simply shed tears and said they would never get another like me. I thought at the time that I, too, was not altogether a lost soul."
"Again a piece of egoism. Again I catch you in vanity. You are boasting, and at the same time reproaching me with the hussar's tears. Why don't I boast of anyone's tears? And yet there may have been grounds for doing so."
"I meant nothing, Foma. It was a slip of the tongue. I couldn't help remembering those old happy times."
"Happy times do not fall from heaven. We make them ourselves. It lies in our hearts, Yegor Ilyitch. That is why I am always happy, and in spite of my sufferings, contented, tranquil in spirit, and am not a burden to anyone unless it is to fools, upstarts, and learned gentlemen, on whom I have no mercy and don't care to have. I don't like fools. And what are these learned gentlemen? A man of learning, and his learning turns out to be nothing but a hoaxing trick, and not learning. Why, what did he say just now? Let him come here. Let all these men of learning come here. I can refute them all. I can refute all their propositions. I say nothing of greatness of soul."
"Of course, Foma, who doubts it?"
"This afternoon, for instance, I showed intelligence, talent, colossal erudition, knowledge of the human heart, knowledge of contemporary literature. I showed and displayed in a brilliant fashion how some wretched Karinsky may furnish a lofty topic of conversation for a man of talent. And did any one of them appreciate me as I deserved? No, they turned away. Why, I am certain he has told you already that I know nothing, and yet perhaps Machiavelli himself or some Mercadante was sitting before him, and only to blame for being poor and in obscurity. That does not penetrate to them. I hear of Korovkin, too. What sort of queer fish is he?"
"He is a clever man, Foma, a man of learning. I am expecting him. He will certainly be a nice man, Foma."
I doubt it. Most likely some modern ass laden with books. There is no soul in them, Colonel, no heart in them. And what is learning without virtue?
"No, Foma, no. How he talked of family happiness. The heart feels it of itself, Foma."
We will have a look at him. We will examine Korovkin, too. But enough, Foma concluded, getting up from his easy-chair. I cannot altogether forgive you yet, Colonel. The insult was too deadly. But I will pray, and perhaps God will shed peace on the wounded heart. We will speak further of this tomorrow, but now permit me to withdraw. I am tired and exhausted."
"Oh, Foma!" cried my uncle in a fluster. "Why, of course you are tired. I say, won't you have something to support you, a snack of something? I will order something at once."
"A snack?"
answered Foma with a contemptuous laugh.
"First they offer you a drink of poison, and then they ask you if you won't have a snack of something. They want to heal the wounds of the heart with stewed mushrooms or pickled apples. What a pitiful materialist you are, Colonel."
"Oh, Foma, I spoke in all simplicity."
"Oh, very well. Enough of that. I will withdraw, and you go at once to your mother. Fall on your knees, sob, weep, but beg for her forgiveness. That is your duty. That is a moral obligation."
"Oh, Foma, I have been thinking of nothing but that all the time. Even now, while I have been talking to you, I have been thinking of it. I am ready to implore her on my knees till dawn. But only think, Foma, what they are expecting of me. Why, you know it's unjust, Foma, it's cruel. Be entirely magnanimous, make me completely happy, think a little, decide, and then, I swear—"
"No, Yegor Ilyitch, no, it's no business of mine," answered Foma. "You know that I do not meddle in the slightest degree in all that. You may be persuaded that I am at the bottom of it all, but I assure you that from the very beginning I have held entirely aloof from this affair. It is solely the desire of your mother, and she, of course, wishes for nothing but your good. Go to her, make haste, fly and rectify the position by your obedience, and let not the sun go down upon your wrath, while I shall be all night long praying for you. I have known no sleep for many a night, Yegor Ilyitch. Good night. I forgive you too, old man," he said, turning to Gavrila. "I know you did not do it of yourself. You forgive me too if I have offended you. Good night all, and may the Lord bless you."
Foma went out. I rushed at once into the room. You've been listening," cried my uncle. "Yes, uncle, I have been listening. And you could call him your Excellency." "What could I do, brother? Indeed, I am proud of it. That was no great act of sacrifice. But what a noble, what a disinterested, what a great man! Sergei, why, you heard yourself. And how I could thrust that money on him, I simply don't understand. Oh, my dear, I was carried away. I was in a rage. I did not understand him. I suspected him. I accused him. But no, he could not be antagonistic to me. I see that now. And do you remember what a noble expression there was on his face when he was refusing the money?" "Very well, uncle. You can be as proud as you like, but I am going. My patience is at an end. For the last time I say it, tell me what you want of me. Why did you send for me, and what do you expect? And if it is all over, and I am of no use to you, then I'm going. I can't endure such exhibitions. I am going this very day." "My dear—" My uncle was in a fluster, as usual. "Only wait 2 minutes. I am going now, dear boy, to Mamma, to settle there a grave, important, immense question. And you, meanwhile, go to your room. Here, Gavrila will take you to the summer lodge. You know the summer lodge, it is in the garden. I have given orders, and your trunk has been taken there, and I'm going in to beg forgiveness and settle one question. I know now what to do, and then I will be with you in a flash, and then I'll tell you everything. I'll open my whole soul to you, and happy days will come for us too sometime. 2 minutes, only 2 minutes, Sergei." He pressed my hand and hurriedly went out. There was nothing to be done. I had to go off with Gavrila again.